So unless you've been living under a complete media blackout or under a rock or off the grid somewhere, you've heard the news that former President Donald J. Trump was indicted in federal court down in Florida this week. And what does that mean? What's next? What can we expect? Well, that's what we're talking about this week, so stick around and find out. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you're having a great week. And I'm going to preface this video with two really important caveats. First and foremost, this is not a political video. I'm not going to be sharing any opinions on what I think about the Donald Trump indictment, whether I think it's a good idea, bad idea, whether I think there's any merit or substance to it, because honestly, I don't know. Second caveat is I'm going to be answering the question of what happens next based really entirely on my experience handling cases and defending clients in federal criminal proceedings for the past 10 years. But all that to say that nothing like this has ever happened before. There's never been a former U.S. president indicted in such a high-level, high-profile case that I can really rely upon to give you any precedent on how this is going to work. So I'm going to give you kind of my best estimate on how here is typically the procedure. Here's how it goes. Here's what comes next. But just know that we're in uncharted waters. And so any or all of this could be completely incorrect, and we're all going to find out together. But President Trump was indicted in a federal court in Florida. He appeared this week at what's called his initial appearance. This initial appearance is standard. It's something that the law requires to happen anytime an individual is indicted in a federal case. And at this initial appearance, typically there are two things in which the magistrate judge presiding over that case has to determine. The first is they need to make sure that the person charged understands what the allegations against them are and what are the nature of the charges. So it's a time for the indictment to be read aloud if that's something that the defendant requests, or at the very least, the judge will ask that individual, have you gone over the indictment with your attorney? Have they explained the information contained within it? Do you understand it? And are there any questions? So that's issue one. Issue two is it's typically what happens at these initial proceedings is the issue of detention gets raised. So is the government seeking to detain the individual while this case is pending? If they're not, then that issue is solved and they move on. It's an easy question. But if the government is seeking to detain, and in other words, keep that person in jail while the case is pending, then that issue needs to be discussed and there needs to be a detention hearing scheduled for sometime in the very near future, typically within 3 or 4 days, here in Texas at least. But in President Trump's case, that's not an issue because the government's not seeking to detain him or to keep him in jail while this case is pending. So really the sole issue that was being discussed or decided at this initial appearance was, does President Trump understand the nature of the allegations being made against him, yes or no? And if yes, then he enters his not guilty plea, and then the case formally proceeds to the next step. So that's exactly what happened. It's why that court appearance was very short, very brief, to the point. The not guilty plea was entered, as is the case in almost 100% of all federal initial appearances, and now the case will proceed further. What happens next, that's where we get into a little bit of a mystery. Typically in a federal case, what happens next is myself as the criminal defense lawyer will reach out to the assistant U.S. attorney in charge of that case, and we'll start discussing the necessary steps so that I can obtain discovery, all of the evidence in the case, so I can start reviewing it. I have initial conversations possibly about what a potential plea offer might look like or what resolution options may be on the table, and we start that negotiation process. It's important to understand that most of those conversations, most of those discussions are informal and they happen really behind closed doors. They happen on phone calls that I make or on emails that I might send, or I might see that prosecutor in the halls and we discuss the cases that we currently have pending, but those don't happen in open court. So I say that to say that there's likely going to be a whole lot going on behind the scenes with Mr. Trump's legal team and the United States Attorney's Office in Florida, that there are going to be discussions there's going to be meetings, there will be sit downs, there will be emails, and a lot of that stuff we may not be privy to. It's all going to be happening whether the public as a whole knows about it or not. And in most federal cases, there aren't a whole lot of public open court hearings that occur between now and when the case ultimately gets resolved, either via a plea deal or trial. There may be several evidentiary type motions that get filed and heard. There might be some motions to suppress if a challenge to the search is being made. But for the most part, in federal courts, at least in my experience, the only times you're realistically in court after this initial hearing is when there's some type of resolution being made in the case, either through a plea or a dismissal or a trial, setting the case for trial. So who knows what's going to happen behind closed doors, but I wouldn't expect to see, President Trump and his legal team appearing at a whole bunch of hearings between now and when we have some resolution. The other thing to know, and again, this is speaking from personal experience, having never dealt with a case this high profile, because realistically nobody ever has, that these cases take a long time, a very long time. President Trump is facing a 37 count indictment, which is a large federal indictment, but it's not unheard of by any stretch of the imagination. These indictments sometimes carry tons and tons of counts because anytime there is a pattern of activity that the government is alleging, each individual act can be its own individual count. That's why those count numbers can get so high. But those cases, because of the magnitude of the discovery and the complexity of the case, it takes a long time to iron out. A further kind of wrinkle in this is that this case deals with classified documents and top secret documents. By its very nature, those are the allegations of the case, that these documents are classified and top secret. Having defended cases in federal court that deal with national security secrets, top secret clearance, and classified documents before, I can tell you that the hoops that the defense lawyer has to jump through, the number of clearances that you have to obtain, the types of approval that the Department of Justice has to get from Washington to release documents for us to review, it takes a long time to iron all that out. And sometimes we get the answer that, well, we can't release this set of documents to you because of their classified nature, and then we have to file a motion for the court to decide, the court has to review those documents in camera. And so there's a whole lot of logistical issues that cases like these have that cause them to drag out for sometimes years and years and years. I mean, you're talking 2, 3, 4 years in some instances between when a client first appears in federal court and when the case is ultimately resolved. So again, the only thing I can take away from this is that I don't think this is going to be a quick process. I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to see a resolution on within the next 4 months, 6 months, or even a year, if I had to guess. It's going to play out. Now, the high profile nature of the case, how much public interest it has, I think is going to speed the process up considerably, because nobody's going to want to sit back and just wait and see what happens. They know that there is this fervor for more information, that the public has this right to knowledge of what's going on. And so I think that is going to expedite things to a pretty good degree, but to what extent, I really don't know. So again, this video, I know it's a whole lot of I don't knows and we'll sees, but really, if you're listening to the news or if you're listening to any type of expert that says, for sure, this is what's going to happen and this is the timeline, take that with a grain of salt, because honestly, this is something that's never happened before and nobody really knows. We're all kind of guessing. We're all kind of waiting to see what the next news break's going to be. So it'll be interesting. It's something I'm definitely keeping my eye on, along with, I'm sure, a great percentage of the American public. As always, if you have any questions or anything like this that you want to discuss or talk about, feel free to reach out, email, phone call, drop by the website and let me know. And if it's a question I can answer, I'm always happy to. But if it's a question I don't have an answer to, I'm always happy to tell you, I have no idea, but I'm willing to talk about it with you. So reach out, let me know. I'm always happy to discuss. Until next week, I hope you all stay safe. Have a great weekend, be good, and stay on the right side of the bars.